Never before had four sisters been four queens, but in this riveting tale, Four Sisters, All Queens, Sherry Jones explores this fascinating phenomena that happened in the 13th century between Marguerite, Queen of France, Eleanor, Queen of England, Sanchia, Queen of Germany, and Beatrice, Queen of Sicily. All sisters, all queens, but a crown is no guarantee of protection. Enemies are everywhere. Go ahead and take a listen. Today on Hidden Heroines of History. The past isn't silent, it's buried. Welcome to Hidden Heroines of History. I'm your host, Gayvin Powers, a published author, award-winning screenwriter, and storyteller who brings women's history to life. Sherry Jones is an international best-selling author of books about kick-ass women in history, from ancient Saudi Arabia to the late 20th century. In her most popular book, Four Sisters, All Queens, Sherry explores sibling rivalry on a royal scale, following Marguerite, Queen of France, Eleanor, Queen of England, Sanchia, Queen of Germany, and Beatrice, Queen of Sicily. A crown is no guarantee for protection. Enemies are everywhere. From the treacherous courts of France and England to the bloody upheaval of the Crusades, Sherry Jones traces the extraordinary true story of four fascinating sisters whose passions, conquests, and progeny shaped the course of history. Let's go ahead and welcome Sherry. Welcome, Sherry. It's great to have you here today.
Hi, thanks, Gayvin. It's great to be here.
I'm so happy that you're joining me. I absolutely loved reading Four Sisters, All Queens. Would you please share with our listeners?
So Four Sisters, All Queens is a story of four girls. They started out as girls in the book who were all daughters of the Count of Provence and the Countess. And the Countess of Provence, because they had all girls, she determined to raise these girls as boys. They learned, Eleanor was into falconry, for example, and Marguerite was very skilled at philosophical discussion. And so all the sisters were educated as boys. Their mother had high ambitions for them. And with the help of their father's close advisor, Romeo, they all married kings or men who became kings. So all four of these sisters became queens. They became the queens of France, England, Germany, and Sicily, which Italy was not united at that time. So Sicily was its own kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
And these four sisters had huge impacts on world affairs.
Mm-hmm.
And so the book is about that. I call it sibling rivalry on a royal scale. Right? They're like all competing with each other, but also their relationships did affect the course of nations. And so I came to these sisters through Nancy Goldstone's book, Four Queens. I happened to be in a bookshop in Seattle, Washington, that sells only biographical books.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had launched The Jewel of Medina and The Sword of Medina, my first two books. And so I was thinking about, what do I want to write about next? And I just knew that I really wanted to stay in the historical fiction realm. So I found this book, Four Queens, and while I was reading it, it struck me how much these four sisters were very much like the four sisters in Little Women. I mean,
Yes, they are, aren't they?
yeah, down to their personalities. I mean, look, Marguerite, the oldest, and even the name, like in Little Women, Meg, which is short for Margaret, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Marguerite and Meg, the eldest sisters, were super responsible. They were sort of the leaders of the pack among the sisters. Then you had Eleanor and Jo.
Mm-hmm.
And Eleanor and Jo are the second sisters. They're both, sort of tomboyish
Mm-hmm.
and very intellectual and also very artistic. Eleanor wore the pants in the family with her husband, King Henry III of England. But she also was really into the songs of troubadours and troubadour entertainment. These were groups of musicians and entertainers who wandered around from court to court, entertaining the courts of the time. And then also she was into the Arthurian legends. And so I think she was a huge supporter of the arts. And she also, as I mentioned before, was did falconry, which was very
Yes.
much a man's sport. So,
Mhm.
and then the third sister in each family, there was Beth and Little Women and Sanchia, four sisters, all queens. Third sisters were very sort of shy, introverted, kind of. They died young. They were the first to die in the families, tragically young.
Mhm.
And then Beatrice and Amy,
Mhm.
the youngest sisters, are self-centered, look at me,
Yes.
sort of flashy. And I believe in Little Women, Amy was an artist. Beatrice was not, as far as I know, an artist, but she was very shrewd, cunning,
Dress.
ambitious herself. And she had that youngest sister kind of thing going, where she was really was the daddy's girl. When I finished Four Queens, I felt like there was so much more I wanted to know about these women.
Mhm.
Four Queens is a really good book. I highly recommend it, but
Mhm.
it didn't give me enough. And the reason, as it turns out, is because there's not a whole lot of history written about these women. Most of the historians focused on their husbands and not them.
That's the challenge with writing historical fiction is finding the documents that are authentic, that are correct, and then parsing it through and then actually creating a story that people can follow. I think you did a really good job of that.
Well, thank you. And yeah, this was my first European medieval novel. And so not only did I have to get story of the sisters, and I mostly gleaned those stories from books written about their husbands or other members of the royal families, or there was a book on Simone de Montfort, who was King
Mhm.
Louis's main advisor and also a very important figure in French history and English history. But I also had to learn about the 13th century, how people dressed,
Mhm.
what they ate, how they spoke, how they lived, what castles were like. And I hadn't been to Europe. I had to study Provence from afar and learn what that was like. That was also really fun. What did knights wear into battle, right?
Right.
Like, could I describe that? Could I talk about that? So I really enjoyed it. It was lots of fun. It was also a lot of information to assimilate. And so, yeah.
You mean, Sherry, you didn't just automatically know what it was like to live in the 13th century?
No, there's no book. There's a famous book about life in the Middle Ages.
Mhm.
It's in the 14th century. And
Right.
so I know that things didn't change as much then as they do now, but still 100 years later seems to me to be maybe I'm risking some anachronisms that I really didn't want to risk.
You bring up a good point because it can change enough. And when rulers change, styles change, tastes change, even clothes change.
Yes, yeah.
Those big collars that was super popular with Queen Elizabeth, but if you
Yeah.
do it 100 years later, they don't have those. So everything from fashion to food to style to dance to etiquette, all of that changes, attitudes.
The Serbian editor caught I had potatoes at a meal, and I had
Mhm.
gotten that from a medieval cookbook, but I think that medieval cookbook I used was introduced after Columbus had been
To America.
and discovered potatoes, and potatoes were actually not yet in Europe. So,
But there's so much trying to get, especially when you don't live in that time period. It's hard to know details like pockets. I feel bad for them. They didn't have pockets. I'd want a pocket. Just a simple pocket would have been nice.
after reading Nancy Goldstone's book, Four Queens, I wanted to learn more, and the best way to really get the essence of these women is to write a fiction about them, and
Mhm.
then I can actually inhabit them, I can become them,
Yes.
and I can learn about them in that way, and, oh man, I had the best time doing that. I really did, writing from the points of view of all four sisters and switching a bit around from sister to sister. This is definitely the most complexly structured book that I've
Mhm.
written. Lot of authors use outlines, and I make outlines, and then I never look at them again. But I do use it but I do use my timeline. I'm very faithful to
Mhm.
my timeline. So I had this long running timeline of all the incidents that happened in each sister's life. And so
Mhm.
when I went to write the next chapter, I would look at my timeline and say, okay, who's got the most compelling story during this chunk of
Mhm.
time? Right from that sister's point of view. I deliberately write about a scene and I'd lead up to this
Mhm.
big climactic thing and then I would stop.
Mhm.
because we're talking about world affairs, it was so important to have different perspectives on these world affairs. But I didn't want to be repetitive and write what happened and then write it again from a different sister's point of view.
People find that people's imaginations always fill in something way better than anything that we can create for them. And one of my
Mhm.
backgrounds is in film, and that was one of the things they taught us. You know, give them the cliffhanger, and their minds will fill in whatever it is they need to fill in. It will be stronger, more emotive. They will put all that in there if you've done your job. Which sister did you enjoy writing the most? Who is the most fun for you to write?
I think Beatrice. I always like to write these bitchy women. They're my favorite. She was so snarky and self-centered, but
Mhm.
also incredibly smart and courageous,
Mhm.
right? Very brave.
Definitely.
She led 21,000 troops over the Alps in a winter snowstorm, to
That's
get to Sicily so her husband, Charles, could become the king. I
that
mean,
is such a
21,000 troops in a winter snowstorm in the Alps, that really happened. And it's hardly
right.
anyone knows that about her, but to me, that's like, wow, that is kick ass.
It's totally chaos. I don't even wanna go outside and take the garbage out when it's
I
raining,
know.
so I can't even imagine 20,000 troops over the Alps in the snows,
Yeah, I know.
and
Yeah, pretty amazing.
very amazing. And speaking of bitchy women, what about Blanche of Castile?
Yeah, I had the most fun writing her of anybody in the book, really.
Yeah.
She was such a horrid woman, such a
Mhm.
cold-hearted, hard as nails, and even maybe kind of in her way, by our standards today, maybe even somewhat of an abusive mother to King Louis.
For sure.
I appreciate people who have religious beliefs, but he took things really to the extreme, wearing a shirt of, animal hair because he wanted it to itch.
Mhm.
It would be in excruciating pain all the time, and he would, like, flog himself. He had himself flogged every day, or he would flog himself every day, and it was his mother who started that. Marguerite came to the court, I think she was 13, and they originally wanted her to marry, I think when she was 11, and her mother had to fight to keep her there, and I think it was until
Mm.
she actually started her period. When she went into
Mhm.
puberty, then they married. In Europe in the Middle Ages, they're marrying young girls, 11 years old, to dukes and counts and kings. It was very common in the upper classes. It was all about property, but also these girls would have life endangering miscarriages because they were impregnated at such early ages.
Yeah.
So the girl's mother worked hard and fought hard to keep these girls at home until they were marriageable age. So I think when Marguerite went to the court, she was 13,
Yeah.
which is still young.
It's still very young. I keep reading historical documents and stories, and a lot of them fight to try to keep the girls as long as possible. And then once they start their periods, though, that's really a ticking time clock for them. And I'd love to jump back really quick to where you were saying about how the flogging had started for Louis with his mom, Blanche. And I wonder because there was some very odd behavior between Blanche and Louis. And part of
Yeah.
me wondered if he was so into his religion out of shame. And I had a a professor in grad school. His name was Gil Dennis, and
Mhm.
he wrote Walk the Line. And Walk the Line was the Johnny Cash story. And he said until he realized Johnny Cash's shame, he couldn't write the book. But once he figured it out, Johnny Cash's shame was that he felt guilty for his brother's death. He blamed himself and he thought it should have been
Mhm.
instead. And so I wonder if there's shame that Louis had put upon himself just because of what's not in the book, but things that we will never know about, and really went to that extreme with religion and wanting to be so pious and flogging himself daily because of whatever shame existed.
Well, I think he was 19 when he and Marguerite married. I believe that's right. My understanding is that he was handsome, a handsome guy. He was a king too. I don't know that he's sort of a scoundrel, or at least he really liked women. And
Mhm.
that's one reason, I mean, maybe he was having sexual relationships with
Mhm.
women in the court or with women in other courts. And so, or with even like the maids or whatever, who
Mhm.
knows? It's one reason why Bla Blanche decided to get him married. It
Mm.
wasn't so that he would produce an heir. As we know, she absolutely did
Mhm.
not want Louis to produce an heir because the minute his wife had a baby
Mhm.
boy, the wife would become the queen and not the
Mhm.
mother. The mother and the It's a weird thing to think about, but the mother and the son ruled together, or she continued to rule with Louis anyway,
Mhm.
because she had been ruling France by herself for, I think he was 9 when his dad died and 19 or something like that. So for 10 years, Blanche ruled France by herself,
Mhm.
and she schooled Louis. But I think that his liaisons with various girls and women, maybe that was a source of shame for him.
Oh,
I'm guessing
right.
he was a very sort of sexual person. But when Marguerite came along, Blanche did everything in her power to keep the 2 of them from consummating the marriage. It was ridiculous. When you read the book, you see the lengths to which she went.
It was completely
Right.
ridiculous, and I went onto Wikipedia, and there's even a mention in Wikipedia about how Blanche tried to keep them apart just, like,
Yeah,
forever. Like, it was like, "Come
yeah.
on, lady, ease up."
It's ironic that she wanted Louis to get married so that he would stop his wild ways, but then she deprived him of having sex with his wife even.
Mhm. It was weird. It was a very weird dynamic.
Yeah, yeah.
Why do you think all these women have in some way been forgotten throughout the centuries?
Well, I think it's because they're women. Even at the time, their accomplishments were downplayed or not recognized at all. The role of Marguerite and Eleanor, for example, at convincing their husbands to make peace. England and France had been at war for
Mhm.
decades, if not centuries, over land. With the Norman invasion, a lot of French land became English land.
Mhm.
And then King John, who was Henry's father,
Mhm.
had lost some of those lands, and then King Henry was determined to take them back. But Eleanor and Marguerite, they wanted peace. They didn't want to be at war. That put the sisters at war
Mhm.
with each other. And so they convinced their husbands to sign this peace treaty. And I don't think they
Yeah.
ever credit for it.
I think you bring up 2 really good points in that 2 sisters wanted peace. They loved each other. Family was more important than fighting over land. They found a way to broker a deal, but that is just a footnote in history. And then that leads into what we're talking about is trying to get the research on these women. It's challenging, and these are queens. So
Yeah.
you were challenged and she was a queen. So I think about the millions of stories that we've lost over the years because they're not retold, they're not written down, and where do we find them? I
Yeah.
think that
Yep.
it's great that historians write about forgotten women. It's great that historical fiction writers write about women. People write their memoirs. It's important that we tell these stories because otherwise they're lost and then we just don't know anymore.
Today, it's true that men still get the lion's share of the spotlight and
Mhm.
credit, you know. To learn about Marguerite, I read a biography of King Louis,
Mm.
and there's also a biography of Blanche de Castile,
Wow.
and that's in French. I don't speak French. I mean, I do speak French now because I live in Paris
Mhm.
part-time and in the States part-time. So I speak French now.
Mhm.
At the time, I didn't speak any French, and I used a translator, and this was when I was writing this book, and so, the technology wasn't nearly as advanced as it is today. To learn about Sanchia, I
Mhm.
read, a biography of Richard of Cornwall, her husband.
Wow.
It was really interesting to me because I read about Richard of Cornwall's his tax advisor or tax guy,
Mhm.
tax collector is what he was,
Mhm.
Abraham, who lived on the property, of the
Mhm.
king's property. And he and his daughter, and apparently Richard had an affair with this young woman, the king's, I mean, Abraham's daughter. And there was this big, huge falling out over it. And it's in my book. I would not have ever read that anywhere else.
Right. That
And
that completely blew my mind when I read that part of the book. That
yeah,
was those you had such great twists in there. I was just my jaw was on the floor.
too.
Mhm,
There is a biography of Eleanor out there in
mhm,
English,
mhm.
but it was very difficult for me to find information about these women. And that's because people haven't written about them, and even at the time, records weren't kept,
Yes.
right? Eleanor of Provence, the book about her, it goes back to, like, looking at the things that were purchased for the castle.
Mm,
They, derive so much they can derive so much information just from that. But
mhm.
there's no, like, diary of hers, there's no anyone writing anything about her while she was alive. It's really kind of disturbing, and it's one reason I write the books I write is to bring these women to light who have been ignored by history or about whom the history has emphasized wrong things.
I like
Like my most recent novel, Josephine Baker's Last Dance,
Mhm,
I thought of her as the black woman in the banana skirt on the Paris
mhm,
stage, and so do so many people. But
mhm.
as I researched her, I found out now we know that she was a World War II spy. But when my book came out, people didn't know that. And she was also one of the most important civil rights activists that the United States has ever known. And people haven't historically thought of her that way. So I was so happy and proud to be able to shine the light on her.
I think that's important because you're bringing up 2 important details for me. And one is how does history remember these women? And so telling these stories, writing these stories are important because people are more than how they dress. People are more than a name, a label. And then also I want to go back just a little bit too, because when you were talking about Sanchia and you were getting little bits and pieces, I've also found that I'll have just maybe one line on someone, and it'll stand out, and it'll be so odd, and it'll be so different than what we might think normal behavior would be now or even centuries ago. You can take that line and sort of mull it over and think, what was behind that? What is the story behind this? And then it starts leading you down paths where it almost feels like sometimes we're detectives when we're writing historical fiction because we get little tiny clues that history's left us and we have to piece it together and say, what does this mean? What does this mean for this person, for their story, for their relationships?
Yeah, like for example, when Marguerite was on the ship going over with Louis, he allowed his men to take their wives on the crusade like it was a pleasure cruise.
No thanks. Like,
I know, right?
that's not fun at all.
Marguerite was not interested, but Louis like, no, you have to go because he thought it would keep morale.
Mhm,
And so Marguerite's on the ship, and there was a fire
mhm,
in Marguerite's room in her
mhm,
berth, and she came running out of her room naked.
mhm,
Jean de Joinville was, King Louis's he was like the Lancelot to
mhm.
King Louis. He was nowhere to be found, and I'm like, "Hmm." And I wonder where he was and why she was naked in her room, and so I just, like, gave
Mhm,
them this
mhm,
love affair, and we
mhm.
don't really know if they had a love affair, but I can well imagine being married to Louis the self-flogger.
Between him flogging himself and his mother-in-law, I was like, "Oh, Marguerite, you poor thing."
I know, I felt bad for her. And so when I was working on Four Sisters All Queens, I had such fun writing the evil witch mother-in-law, Blanche de Castile, that I decided I want to tell her story. I want to explore how she got to be this odious person.
Mhm,
And so I wrote this prequel to the book, White Heart, which tells Blanche's story before Four Sisters All Queens begins.
mhm,
What happened to her when her husband, who she loved, they
mhm,
said that when he died in the crusade, he died of dysentery.
mhm,
She had gone out to meet him. She
mhm.
threw herself down to the road and just started shrieking with grief, and people
Wow.
were all scandalized because that's not how a queen is supposed to act. And
Mhm.
she was young, and she had to buck up, and she
Mhm.
decided to protect the throne for her son, Louis. And so she never married. She was like Queen Elizabeth. She wasn't a virgin queen, but she sort of presented herself that way. And she had her own passions. And as you'll see, as you might see if you read White Hart, she was tough as nails for a very good reason. This is what these women did what they had to
Mhm.
do in a patriarchal society to reach their fullest potential. They had many obstacles and hurdles placed in front of them, societal, psychological, material, and they had to become very adept at getting past them some way to achieve their own full potential.
Mhm.
I think that that's the common thread in all my books is that's what keeps me going. These women who inspire me are the ones who I tend to write about.
And
Yeah.
also, I think they did whatever they could just to survive. They
Yeah.
and it was come and the rules were changing all the time. Court life was not all pageantry and dances and roses and fairy tales. It was vicious.
It was.
So, I have a lot of reasons in my mind in asking this question. I think there's a lot of reasons why these women would be considered dangerous to each other, to themselves, to the men around them. But I'd love to know off the top of your head, what really do you think makes them the most dangerous or each one the most dangerous in their time period?
Sanchia was really considered to be dangerous. She was a pretty meek and mild person. I
Mhm.
think she largely conformed to her husband, Richard, was probably abusive, very
Yeah.
domineering and philandering.
Mhm.
Of course, all these men probably were
Mhm.
philanderers. They were considered dangerous because they were strong women. And the patriarchy, they are threatened by strong women. I
Mhm.
mean,
It creates a very dangerous precedence when you can't speak your mind, when you can't speak your voice, when our voices are silent. And I think that for centuries, women's voices have been silent. And I think that's why it's important for us to use our voices, use our writing, and to
mhm.
tell these stories and to tell our truths. Because otherwise, other people are going to do it for us. What does that mean? I just read the other day. Did you read this about how a woman retranslated the Odyssey? And so when Odysseus comes back to be with his wife, all these other male authors have written about how the women on staff gave themselves to the suitors. And she had found that there was a translation in there that had said that these women had been enslaved in Odysseus's house. And so you can't give yourself to a man if you're enslaved. There's a power struggle there. So it brings a completely different meaning to why these women were killed and murdered when he came home. So she's redoing a new translation, which I can't wait to read. What do you think about intuition concerning these four sisters, these four queens? And then did you have any experiences yourself as you were writing this or going through this with this story?
Well, I do think that each woman's intuition really guided their actions to a large extent. It's what
Mhm.
separated them from their husbands in a certain way. They're the ones who were the peacemakers. They were the ones whispering. Well, Marguerite wasn't able to whisper into Louis's ear, but Eleanor certainly was very influential with Henry. And Marguerite obviously had some effect because she got Louis to that meeting, with Henry
Mhm.
to sign the Paris Treaty. And then I think that's what the women and their sensibilities, their emphasis on peace, their sense of humanity, their support of humanity.
Mhm.
I think that's all super important. And I think it also has to do with like women's role as life bearer, life giver,
Mhm.
wanting to preserve life as opposed to destroy life.
Mhm.
And Marguerite ruled France for while Louis was on his final crusade, the one in which he died of dysentery. She ruled France
Mhm.
in his absence. She didn't go along for the second. When she went on that first crusade, while she was on the crusade, she became quite pregnant. There's a scene in the book where she
Mhm.
is she rescues Louis. She
Mhm.
goes to ransom him from prison in Alexandria. And so she travels in a boat on the Nile. to ransom him. There's no one else to do it. And Beatrice is in the boat with her. Charles has also been captured. So she goes to pay the ransom for them. She's got the money. And there's a crocodile attacking the boat. And Marguerite is pregnant and she's bludgeoning a crocodile with an oar. That's incredible to me. What an amazing story. So amazing.
Yeah, the lengths we go through for the ones that we love. Fully pregnant, bludgeoning a crocodile, making sure you don't tip the boat over, mind you, and then go save your husband in enemy territory.
It was also her duty. She was the queen. She had to do this for her country. Maybe Beatrice went along for Charles out of love. I'm not sure there was a lot of love between Marguerite and Louis. After he died, she refused to testify at his sainthood hearing. He became Saint Louis, but she wouldn't testify on his behalf.
I remember reading that and I thought, wow, Marguerite has like some gumption there because after everything she had been through, she was like not having it anymore, not making him a saint in death.
And also, while he was gone, she ruled France. Blanche had died by this point, I believe. She ruled France. The French treasury was drained almost dry by all the wars and battles and this and that and crusades. And she replenished the treasury for France. And then Louis drained it again with his crusade. She was an amazing ruler in her own right. And so I'm just really in awe of these women. Sanchia, she became Queen of Germany. And in my book, she kind of dreads it because she's not that personality type. And she knows she's not going to have any real power with the husband she has.
Yeah.
And he's disappointed in her. He thinks she'd make great queen like her others, like her sisters, but she's too timid and shy and introverted.
He's also too overbearing. And so I imagine it just pushed her even more into the shell that she already had because she was shy and introverted.
Yeah, she was. Yeah, your heart kind of goes out to her.
It sure does. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up?
Let's see. Four Sisters, All Queens does not exist as an audiobook.
Okay.
And I am taking steps to create my own.
Yes.
Because I love audiobooks. So that will be coming out sometime this year.
Oh, yes, let us know because we'll let everyone know here when it comes out.
I think so too.
That's usually how I listen to all the books for the podcast as well because I write and edit all day. Do you have a cup with you? At the end of every podcast, we just go and toast to our wonderful author, you. And we also toast to the wonderful women that you wrote about, which would be Marguerite and Eleanor and Sanchia and
Beatrice.
Thank you. And Beatrice. Beatrice would be very upset if I did not include her.
Would.
But also, yeah, she would. Maybe we should say that again with Beatrice first because she was the youngest and always wanted to be included. So, Beatrice, here's to you outside independently. And then also to any sister who feels pushed aside, left out, has conflict with your other sisters, any woman who's struggling, this is also to you. And we're with you. We see you. May it get better. Just hang in there. And you want to add anything to that, Sherry, to our toast, all of them?
Yeah, I would say only now, many years after I wrote this book, have I come to realize how true it is that family comes first, whether that's your biological family or your adopted family of friends. So here's to family.
Here's to family. Yes.
Yeah.
Cheers. And thank you so much, Sherry, for being here. Cheers to you. Yes. Cheers. Thanks for being here, Sherry.
Having me. It was really great talking with you.
Absolutely.
Have a great day.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
If you enjoyed this, like, share, and subscribe. We have more amazing episodes planned. You can listen to them on the Hidden Heroines of History podcast on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, and iHeartRadio.